Welcome to our lesson on the book of Esther. I have I've suggested the theme, proposed a theme for the book of Esther, being the providence of God. Being the providence of God. There are many individual lessons you can actually draw from the book of Esther, from leadership to courage, to character, a lot of things. But overall, I'd like to suggest for us to look at the providence of God in every way. Are you able to hear me with the background? My neighbor just decided to let off all the fireworks and firecrackers.
We thought it was Pat going crazy in the kitchen.
Honestly, that's what I thought as well. I thought Pat was doing something.
I think we're doing renovation or something.
The providence of God. Praise the Lord. Okay, so please be patient with me. All right. So for lesson 1, this particular session, I will just go into the introduction of the book of Esther. So the providence of God, in one sense, why do I pick the providence of God? Because we can see it from the structure of the book, which I will share in a little while, right? And it is actually implied in Esther 4:1-4, you know. In this says, you know, when Mordecai, all right, her cousin, right, says, in the midst of crisis, somebody need to rise up, all right? And we see Esther being moved or promoted into a situation whereby she was in a position to do something. And this was the challenge that was given to her. Therefore, if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows that you have come to this position, or you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Whatever happens to Esther and whatever happens to us, even at this moment, is not an accident. It is by design, God's design and providence from years back in preparation. And the reason why we are in, for example, in university, in a particular workplace, in a position, our position in church, you know, being in Piasau Baptist Church itself, you could be in different places. Really, I believe it is by God's design. It's by God's design. Who knows that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this? I could cite many personal examples that I can see, but time does not permit it. Maybe I'll share it as we go along. The providence of God. That providence of God extends even to the bedroom of the world's greatest ruler of that time. That at that moment, we can see that it was recorded he could not sleep. All right, he had insomnia. Even a problem like that, a health issue, God caused him to rise and to search out to something to read, and that became a turning point. We will look at that also. All right. Proverbs 21:1 says, "The king's heart is like channels of water in the hand of the Lord. God turns it wherever he wishes." So as we pray, as we consider situations around us, we need to continue to trust God, that God will turn the hearts of the individuals, of a difficult person, of a difficult situation. He will turn things around. And we see a turning point is that there is a combination in the story later on. Okay, if you have read through it, or when you read through it, there are one after the other so-called coincidences. The king, when he woke up, just happened to ask for the royal records to be read. right? In the middle of the night, you go and search out, go to the storeroom and pull out records to read. And the place he read happened to be something that a Jewish person, right, did for him, a foreigner did for him. And the bad guy of the story happened to be in the palace at the right time, at the right place, so on and so forth. There are just too many coincidences in these things. So we see the providence of God, and ultimately the security of God's people lies in the hands of God. Okay, so as we read through, there are 3 Ds that if you want to remember how the book can be structured. Okay, this is just one way of helping you, look at the outline of the book. The 3 Ds are danger, decision, and deliverance. The first part of the book, the first 3 chapters, talk about the danger to God's people. And God knows what is coming ahead, what is going to happen to his people. But so he engineers, he set the stage so that there will be a person in place to help, to bring help to his people. God works through people. The second aspect is the decision that when it was presented to Mordecai and especially to Esther, how would they react? How would she react in times when she is invited, in a sense, to partake in God's plan of saving his people? So she had to make a decision during that time. And the third area is, the third aspect of it is the deliverance from chapter 6 to chapter 10 onwards. We see how things turn around when the people of God are threatened. Okay? So as we go along, I won't go into the details, but we will revisit this as we carry on in the series, right? We see the demotion as well as the promotion of individuals. We see the heart, the evil intent as well as the good intent of the different characters. And as we come to the decision aspect, we see the struggle that they have to face and the challenges that they have to face. And finally, when we look at the deliverance, we rejoice in the turnaround. We see how God, what we call the wisdom of the advisor, turn things around that result in the defeat of Israel's enemies. So this is a bit of the outline of Esther. We will keep in mind 3 Ds. What are the 3 Ds? I should blank my screen. Okay. What are the 3 Ds again? Anyone?
The first one is danger.
Okay. Second one?
Decision.
Decision. Excellent. Third?
Deliverance.
Deliverance. Amen. Okay. So remember these 3 Ds. Yeah, 3 Ds. So as we look at these areas, we will also explore some major themes. We will look at the hiddenness of God. We will find about we will come across how the Jews and their enemies come together, how the Jews relate to their enemies as well. Okay, the fear of the Jews, right, can only be explained by the fact that their enemies acknowledge ultimately that they were, firstly, the Jews themselves were threatened to the point of extinction, but yet in a turnaround, their enemies fear them, and they realize that God had put a supernatural hedge of protection around them, right? And we see this idea of a reversal. Yeah, you see this particular thing, this particular V shape that is happening here, right? This V shape. First of all, see, let me see, I can, yeah, this thing coming down, right? It started off with the greatness of the king, all right? And then it slowly goes down with the Jews being threatened, with the Jews being threatened. So it comes down in here. So the greatness of the king, the banquet, and of the Persians, and then how Esther identifies as a Gentile. But as you go up, you see a reversal. Yeah, you see a reversal. For example, from the banquets of the Persians, you will read about the banquets of the Jews, how they celebrated their deliverance. How when Esther identified herself as a Gentile, you find that the Gentiles then begin to identify as Jews, right? You see the elevation of Haman, the enemy, the enemy of the Jews. But here you see the elevation of the person, a Jew being a prime minister, so on and so forth. You will see this V shape of reversal. It's like any movie that you watch, especially, there will be a time whereby the heroes would struggle. Yeah. And everything, especially I realized this when I watched Star Wars, right? There'll be a point whereby the bad guy seems to be winning. The bad guy seems to be winning, and and the good guys are fighting for their life. And suddenly something happened, and there is a reversal, and the good guys started winning. And that is element of a great drama as well. Yeah? So in the midst of all this, we see the hand of God keeping His people safe. So these are the major themes of the scripture. When I was reading, doing my devotion one time, I was reading through Jeremiah, right? And the Lord promised through Jeremiah, it says, the word of the Lord came to me in Jeremiah 24. It says, and that was before the people were exiled, before they were taken away to a foreign land. Yeah, and this is what the Lord, the God of Israel says, like the good figs, right? Jeremiah saw a vision of two baskets, one a basket of good figs, the other a basket of bad figs, right? It says, for those good figs, I regard as good the exiles from Judah, whom I sent away from this land to the land of the Babylonians. But my eyes will watch over them for their good, and I will bring them back to this land. Right? I will build them up and not tear them down. I will plant them and not uproot them. I will give them a heart to know me, that I am the Lord. They will be my people, and I will be their God. For they will return to me with all their heart. You see, God promised that He will watch over when the people were exiled to the foreign lands, right? And when the enemies who conquered them, scattered them, dispersed them so that they cannot gather together in order to rise up as one and fight against their enemy against, what called this rule by division, right? But God says, wherever you are, I will watch over them. I will bring them back. And we see that in the book of Esther, it is in the context, it's in the timing when actually some of the exiles will actually be back. Okay? We will look at the timing in a short while. But even at this point, for those exiles who remain in the foreign lands, we see in the book of Esther that God is also watching over them for their good. But He was hidden. But His hands, we can see the handprints of God among the events, right? We also find that over and over again, the Jews had to contend with their enemies. They had to contend with their enemies. And indeed, we find that the devil wanted Satan wanted to stamp out the Jews because salvation is from the Jews. If it's not from the Jews, then we have no Jesus. And we have no Jesus, we have no gospel. No gospel, we have no salvation. And with no salvation, we have no church. We won't be here today. Satan has been trying his level best to destroy the Jews through the pages of history. From the slaughter of the baby boys in Egypt under Pharaoh's order, to the slaughter of the 2 years and below in the time of King Herod. And we also read about it in Haman. We read about King Herod. We see the Hitler in the Second World War trying to stamp out the Jews, yeah, and Hamas. They all tried it. And Hamas being the terrorist organization at this point, yeah. So salvation is of the Jews, and Satan is set against the Jews. All right. We have seen just now the reversal of so-called fortunes, and we will explore the themes of power, prominence, promotion, and passion. Yeah? The passion we are talking about is a passion for God's people. And this being Chinese New Year celebration, the book of Esther is the reason. Yeah? The events of Esther is the reason for the Jews to celebrate the feast of Purim. And the feast of Purim is usually around this time, February or March, right? And the reason for this we will find in the book of Esther and Esther chapter 9, is that the time they were to remember it, to celebrate when the Jews get relief from their enemies. When their sorrow was turned into joy, their mourning into a day of celebration. And during that time, in this, they would read from the scroll of Esther. And this is a time when they are given permission, can you imagine? Make a lot of noise in church. And everybody is given a little, this called rattler. So whenever the enemy, Haman, his name is being mentioned 54 times, they would rattle it and heckle him. All right. And it's a time when they will celebrate by wearing costumes to hide what is actually underneath. Represents the hidden hand of God. And even also Esther disguising her Jewish identity for a season. And they would have a lot of eating. And this little pocket here is called Haman's pocket. Right, and they would share food with the less fortunate as well. To give food baskets, give presents of food to one another, and gifts to the poor. So it's a season for celebration, but it's also a season for charity as well. They remember the goodness of the Lord in this time. Yeah, it has become a little bit more secular. All right. It's become a bit more secular at this point, yeah, at this point in time. But Esther, the events of Esther is the reason why the Jews celebrate Purim at this point. Yeah. So let's read Esther chapter 1, verse 1 to 3. And this is what it says. This is what happened during the time of Xerxes. Okay, I'm reading from the NIV. They use the Greek version of his name. If you have used other versions, they may use the Hebrew word Ahasuerus. Okay, Ahasuerus. Okay, so but for the sake of pronunciation easier, I'll use the word Xerxes. The Xerxes who ruled over 127 provinces, stretching from India to Kush. At the time, the king Xerxes reigned at his royal throne in the citadel of Susa, and in the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a banquet for all his nobles and officials. The military leaders of Persia and Media, the princes and the nobles of the provinces were present. This is by way of introduction. And this is where it sets the timing for the book of Esther. We have studied the book of Nehemiah. And where does the book of Esther happen? Where does the book of Esther happen? The story of Esther began in the 3rd year of Xerxes. We see this in verse 3. The 3rd year of his reign. And that means that quite easily historians or scholars are able to perceive, to identify through history books, historical records, when Xerxes started. So the book of Esther, the events of the book of Esther started about 473 BC. That is 240 years after Assyria, what happened? Okay, after Assyria conquered the northern kingdom, took away the kingdoms of Israel because of the idolatry, and then 240 years before, and then later 100+ years before, after Nebuchadnezzar conquered or exiled the Jews from the southern kingdom, took them away from them. After the Babylonian Empire, then the Medes and the Persian joined forces, and King Cyrus defeated the Babylonians in 538 BC. And then it was King Cyrus that allowed the Jews to go back. And we see this happening, for example, under 3 movements, 3 waves of return. One under Zerubbabel, that is in the book of Ezra. Second movement back is under under Ezra chapter 7, and then we also studied about from the book of Nehemiah, the 3rd return. And where does the book of Esther or the events of Esther happen? It is after the first wave of return for exile. And so we see that the Jews started going back to Jerusalem, but not everyone went back at one time. It could be because of the distance. It could be because Jerusalem was a mess, and they said, hey, we've started a life here, and we might as well just stay on and work, make the best out of it. But the Jews, everywhere they go, especially during that time, they also face opposition. They face suspicion from their so-called host countries as well, because they tend to be very entrepreneurial as well, right? So there was a lot of resentment against the Jews, and even that resentment carries on until today, right? So it was no different in the book of Esther during this time. And when you talk about the Persian Empire, it says Xerxes ruled over 127 provinces. Means this guy, this king is somebody who is extremely powerful, right? And this is what he was trying to do later on when we read chapter 1 in total, right? We'll cover it next week. But we can see that it stretches, his empire stretches from India all the way to Kush, which is the northern part of Africa, and all the way up to Europe as well. That is the extent of his empire, 127 provinces. And it's so big that the Persian Empire had actually 4 capital cities. They actually had 4 capital cities. One is Babylon on the west side. Another is this on the north called Ecbatana. Then another one is Persepolis. And where Esther is happening is in the capital city, the southern capital of Susa or Shushan, depending on the version that you're reading, right? But I want us also to take a note, okay, from here. At this time, King Xerxes or Ahasuerus is also trying to expand the kingdom or his empire to go against Greece, right? Just keep this in mind, what's happening on this side. Yeah. So because from the city-states, small city-states of Greece will arise a new conqueror who is going to topple this entire empire. That is Alexander the Great. That will be something in history short while. So they are starting to fight a war at the border at this point. That may be the reason why Xerxes could be one of the reasons why Xerxes wanted to throw this immense party in chapter 1. Let's look at some of the characters. Okay, the key characters here, we've got 16 names mentioned in chapter 1. All right, 16 names. But the key characters here is Xerxes. Okay, Xerxes is the Greek name. Ahasuerus is the Hebrew name. All right, I will try not to pronounce the Persian name. Yeah. Okay, so Xerxes, his name is mentioned at least about 30 times in the book of Esther. And of course, the heroine, Esther herself, her name is mentioned about 55 times, Mordecai 60 times, and the evil Haman 54 times. But there is one name that is not mentioned, right? What's unusual about the book of Esther? These are a few things. It's one of two books that are named after women, all right? Who can tell me what is the name of the other book? Pat says Ruth, okay? Pat says Ruth. Again, very powerful, two very powerful books of courage of women or dedication of women in the time of darkness. Okay. The second thing that we can notice is that scholars said it is the only Old Testament book that is not found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, all right? And the Dead Sea Scrolls were the earliest documents, the scrolls closest that can verify for example, the book of Isaiah. Almost a whole complete book of Isaiah was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls that verify the authenticity of the book of Isaiah, for example. Okay? It's not quoted by Jesus and the New Testament writers. And there is only one religious practice that was mentioned there. Anybody can remember? Okay. What is that religious practice that was mentioned?
The Purim?
The Purim is later on a celebration. Today is not so much, the, what do you call this? Spiritual one, okay, in some way, it's becoming more secular. Okay, that's a good try. Anything else? One
Fast
more.
and pray?
Sorry?
Fast and pray.
Half correct. Only fasting is mentioned, but no prayer. Yeah, so that's a very strange thing. It says fast for me, yeah, but no mention of prayer. All right, okay. And apparently, the Greek historian, the contemporary, who was born around 480 BC, wrote these histories. Okay, and they attested the book of Esther as well. Okay. It is the setting of Esther is entirely outside Israel, outside the Promised Land, and importantly, even Margaret Thatcher put this question to her staff. I understand. The word God is not mentioned in the book of Esther. That's why there's no prayer. There's only fasting. Okay? There's no mention of God in the book of Esther. But then you can say, even though there's no mention of God, we can still see the handprint of God. We can still see the handprint of God, the providential hand of God in every situation. Like every line, like a playwright, you know, every line, every character, every act, every scene flows from his thoughts and pen. Right? Every character, every plot, every issue, every resolution also flows from the hidden hand of God. His presence is overwhelming if we have eyes to see. And that's the joy when I read through the book of Esther. When we cannot see God, He is still at work in subtle ways, working through our lives, working through circumstances, working through even sinful men. And to close for today, as we go through the book of Esther, you know, another very important verse that a lot of people also remember is this: how she would exhibit courage during that time. You know, when she had to go and appeal, okay, and make an appeal to the king. All right, she says, "I will go to the king, okay, and even though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. If I perish, I perish." It is at that point we also see Christ being exemplified. Christ was willing to give up his life for our sake. How might Esther challenge us? The book of Esther challenge us. You know, in these few sessions that's upcoming, I think it will challenge us to look at our character in times of challenges. It will help us evaluate our faith in difficult times. It will challenge us to evaluate our associations, who we relate to. We see how, for example, Mordecai and Esther, you know, their interaction. Or we look at Haman and the king. Look at the associations. It will also evaluate our actions as well. So what will we do in times of crisis? So when we cannot see God, remember his providential hand, that he is still at work to bring about his purpose and to preserve his people. That's all I have to share for just as an introduction. Let's just